In this real side experience, although my surroundings were unfamiliar to my personal self, the real awareness as a part of the isness everything reality that permeates through all consciousness, all ideas effected from consciousness therefore are available to the real awareness. As such, nothing created, including the environments we are experiencing, will the real awareness be unable to identify. So impressions afforded to the personal self would reveal this was an actual physical level location within a country on the earth. As oftentimes can the real side experiences present us with a physical level earth countries, but not always exactly the same as they are on the densest creational physical level, for the various reasons this may be. Interestingly, what was currently taking place in this real side experience was a little along the lines of what took place on the physical a few days after I arrived in Mexico. For as I was attempting to return to the ranch, so would I manage to get myself lost, taking a wrong turn that led me onto the private property of another ranch. Realizing my error and turning back the way I had come, where I would decide then to rendezvous with Dwayne and Ava at the beach, as opposed to very likely taking another wrong turn if I continued to attempt to find my own way back, and during my trek to meet with Dwayne and Ava, so I would be accompanied for a certain duration of the journey by one of the many wild dogs that are prevalent in Mexico, that although some can be somewhat aggressive, especially when in packs, this was a small, solitary dog, and seemingly rather friendly, as I would pet her and she would keep me company along the dirt track I was walking along that led me back from the ranch that I had trespassed upon. The real side experience then would be a situation where I was also lost seemingly. I had been separated from the group I was with, that comprised of Val and Kelsey, in a country of the earth that, as I said, was an actual area, but one I wasn't familiar with. And just as it was on the physical, where I found myself unsure as to my direction and being accompanied by a small brown wild dog, so the very same dog now was featuring in this real side situation where I was lost also. And here the dog would as though glean my attention, and the impressions I received were that I should follow her. For it is so that this real awareness isness everything reality animates through every consciousness affected body form, and although body types such as animals will be operating based on certain consciousness programs which dictate their species traits and behaviors, and from a personal creational perspective, communication with animals is somewhat limited, if not impossible in certain species cases. It is so that interaction is indeed possible through a being to being, real awareness to real awareness standing. This is more common on the real side, but can take place on the physical also, and we can in actuality exchange actual dialogue that makes sense between animal forms and our own human body types. The animal body forms lacking the consciousness programs and body mechanics to actually speak and understand our human languages, but more impressions in actuality, impressions between the real awarenesses that animate the animal and human body types, that become translated that our personal selves understand the nature of the exchange. It is so then that the real awareness of any animal form can assist us in all manner of creative ways, again especially on the real side, as though not only are conversations made possible, deciphered from the impressions shared, but that the animal forms can be directly animated by the real awareness to carry out various actions as assistance for the body forms as animated by other real awarenesses. That in actuality, as I said, with a real awareness that is through all consciousness and can access all ideas contained therein, so being lost on the real side would be an impossibility. But on occasions, real awareness overview impressions are not afforded, that we may experience being lost, as in this situation, and certain other situations then unfold as a consequence. In this case, as an opportunity to share such, where I can reiterate how real awareness being-to-being interaction and assistance can be so, irrespective of the body forms animated. That the dog, although not communicating with me, had made it apparent that I was to follow her, and she would lead me to a disused railway track. We would board what seemed a train of a kind, though it had more the appearance of an amusement park ride. She would jump in first and regard me as though I was to do likewise. I would assume the seat beside her. The train would begin to trundle down the tracks of its own volition, as though it had been waiting for us to board before mobilizing. The train would terminate in another area of the country I was in. My impressions were that although the track wasn't an actual physical level feature of the country, where we had departed from was, as I said, and our destination was also. As I vacated the train, so the dog would remain aboard it, as though awaiting patiently for my return. We had arrived in a very dilapidated part of the country we were in, the housing comprising of rudimentary makeshift shacks. The only other individuals present would be two females, one far older than the other. The elderly woman would gesture toward me, and as I looked to where she indicated, I realized I had a curious necklace strung around my neck. She beckoned that I approach her. I would do so, and taking the necklace in her hands, she would imbue it with a certain power, and indeed additional geometrical shapes would now be a part of the necklace. She proclaimed that this necklace was required for my journey. I would thank and bid the woman farewell, and proceeded along the only direction available to me, a dirt track. My path would open onto what looked again like something you might see in an amusement park, a little like the entrance leading to a building with a particular theme or idea as an amusement, where the exterior is designed in such a way as to appeal and draw you in. My impressions were, however, that this building was not visible where it was located in the country I was in. Present on the physical level, yes, but as though concealed, as though disguised in some way. That utilized was some advanced stealth technologies that had the entrance to this building able to blend in with the environment it was in. And although the real awareness, with its creational oversight, could have determined its presence despite this, from a personal perspective, it was as though certain frequencies were required to render the entrance visible, a frequency that was emitting from the geometrical shapes, courtesy of the lady from earlier, as she had made the geometric additional alterations to my necklace. As I said, this wouldn't be necessary for the real awareness that such geometry was required, but this was an actual, physical level Earth location that impressions suggested I was to find, and were I to attempt to do so on the physical, I would need to unveil the entrance of this structure, possibly utilizing the frequencies that the geometry represented. As everything simulated at its base state is a unique frequency, and as much as a certain frequency can be simulated expressed as a shape, so can it be a certain sound, smell, or even a flavour. So we are never limited to just geometric shapes, etc. As I entered, the structure comprised of a series of chambers, and each containing an assortment of robots that were designed to be in the appearance of various body forms, from human to reptilian to walking feline forms, greys, etc. It was as though a robotic representation of many different alien body types. Not only that, but present in certain chambers would be robotic animal forms indigenous to Earth, and other animal forms that impressions suggested would be native to the planets that these other aliens, robot represented, hailed from. It was almost as though a robotic zoo or a display, like you might even find in a museum, where all the body forms are recreated and made available for perusal. Except these robots were fully functional, were mobile, and would interact with any visitor, for indeed they served as vehicles for awareness, just as any biological form might. As though a created selection of robots representing various aliens and animal forms and impressions suggested, this was as though just the initial part of what was a very vast structure, and what was orchestrating and overseeing this curious robotic exhibit was to be found deeper within. And so I would speak with some of the robotic beings. I would shake the hand of one robot body form that was of a species similar to humans, but with 4 arms. But he would seem to dislike this gesture, however, as though unaccustomed to such. As I said, robots they may have been, but were animated by awareness and had their own developed consciousnesses, personal selves, attitudes, and quirks. None of the robots were aggressive, however, more curious. The animal robots, although some were of the more potentially dangerous species, such as lions, and some of the more alien exotic animal robots, looked as though they could be rather formidable, They would simply regard me absently from where they stood or were laying. As I proceeded deeper, I came to sections that were as yet to be built and made fit for purpose, open areas with the various tools scattered about, materials, etc., required for their construction, though my impressions were that just as the entrance was concealed, that it would blend in with the environment, that certain frequencies were required to render it visible, so this was the case here, that what were still further sections of the complex that were in operation, but what they contained or comprised of would be denied the ability of a human to perceive, absent of still further particular frequencies, maybe additional as yet to be provided geometry for my necklace, and until then these sections had the appearance of a typical human-style work-building sites at a point prior to the first stages of construction. I would come to a door, it would be sealed, and I had the impression that through it would perhaps greater clarification of this situation be so. But impressions revealed I was not to enter this door at this time, but perhaps so at a later moment. I would then exit the structure, and as I turned back to look, the entrance would reformat, as though becoming momentarily pixelated, reforming, and then blending into the environment in such a way that it was no longer apparent as though the geometric frequencies needed be in a close proximity that the entrance be unveiled. However, real awareness impressions would reveal that overall, somewhere in the country I was in, is the entrance to a complex of chambers that, as I said, is invisible unless one were to be in possession of something that emits a particular frequency, though the exact geometric shapes and frequency required wasn't made apparent to my personal self. But impressions further revealed the entrance was in the side of a mountain, containing very possibly robotic body forms as I described and was shown, but that leads deeper into still further chambers. For a real side experience I had many years ago would present as though a small cave in the side of a mountain, and as I ran my hands over the smooth cave inner wall surface, so would geometric shapes manifest, and an entrance would become apparent. My impressions with that experience was of either a spacecraft or an alien base buried in the mountain, designed in such a way that would allow entry by certain keyed individuals, and in fact that experience and this current recent one were revealing the same mountain buried base or ship, suggesting the very real possibility of my finding and accessing it, and perhaps engaging with whatever beings are present within, as this real side experience hinted would be the case, the door within the complex that I wasn't as yet granted entry through, but beyond which lay the answers as to the purpose of this ship or base. The scene would switch, and I would now be in my physical level house recreated, representing the consciousness, though as time goes by, very likely the consciousness representing house will change, as what serves as my current home is the ranch in Mexico, and not the previous house that was located in the UK. Present within were 2 individuals that impressions revealed were real guides, and I was as though providing them my report of my findings in regards to the alien ship or base buried in the mountain. Interestingly, my sister was present also, flip-flopping as she seems to constantly be between intent with her real awareness and her personal self, with its more obstructive, interfering, and on occasion dark force supporting inclinations. At that moment, as I was sharing my experiences with the guides, she was as though partially traversing across what appeared to be a bridge that was featuring within my house. One guide would remark to her that it's just a case of crossing it and to keep going. This I have seen before on the real side, the idea of crossing over from the personal consciousness embracing self to the real awareness unknown of all life beyond, often represented as traversing a bridge. And quite clearly here, Lindsay was struggling with the law and pull of the personal self, rather torn between that and her real purpose, that of ease recognition, fluctuating between the 2 positions as the real side tends to reveal her as in a constant state of doing. That it would appear to simply be a case of crossing the bridge, but the personal self is very strong, and it takes the focus and determination it will to really cultivate the intent to stand real, as the being of light she and everyone actually is. But the guides were still affording her assistance and encouragement, as they do see potential in her, despite some of the more dark force affiliated choices she has a tendency to make on the real side. And so, sing the new you song. It is your connection to the true reality, the all is, that the real you, your real awareness, is a part of. New